Hi everyone, welcome to day one of the masterclass, and I am just gonna share my screen. Uh, okay, let us do this. Fab. So this is day one of the masterclass. We are going to be talking today about the hidden cost of drift, what it's costing you. Um, and yeah, I think really understanding what it looks like and why it can go unnoticed for so long, and what those emotional, physical, and practical costs are of staying stuck. And for me, it's all about generating awareness. That is the first step towards making any changes and really figuring out the gap from where you are now to where you actually want to be. So I'm focused now on helping people stop drifting and starting to live on purpose. And I created something called the balance reset, which really helps identify people where they are now, and the balance operating system, which really helps you move from where you are to where you want to get to, just by seeing clearly what the gaps are and then taking small changes, meaningful changes on a daily basis. And what I believe is that you don't need another productivity hack, you don't need another planner, and you don't need to push harder. And that we're really in this place because modern life makes drift easy with the constant information, the constant notifications, work that never really stops, and all that pressure to keep up and perform and have it all figured out. So this experience is about taking all of that back, not about more productivity or about being perfect, but just through awareness, being intentional and consciously designing our days. And a couple of things that I really want to focus on today are what I call the tolerance trap, which is basically starting to tolerate things that you would not tolerate before. So as you know, it's a bit of creep kind of things that you wouldn't put up with start to just gradually become acceptable. So you might get less sleep, you might work longer hours, you might not take a break, and those types of things start eating in. And the autopilot effect, which is all about, for me, it's just those routines that you get into on the basis that you've kind of fallen into this tolerance trap. You then start to do some of these things on autopilot, and I call that the autopilot effect. And what we want to do today is expose all of that and really look at what are some of those things that we're doing and how can we stop doing that. And what I've mentioned before is, for me, the most dangerous place to be in life isn't unhappy, it's fine. And that's what I call this drift that a lot of us find ourselves in. And that we are in this state of chaos and burnout and stress, and that was definitely me. But having understood now from studying psychology, neuroscience, habit science, and human design, and coming up with a Balance OS framework, is these 14 things I want to drill into in a little bit more information today. So, first of all, looking at the psychology of drift, and really why smart people end up living the lives that they didn't design. And all of this is taken from my blog content that I've been creating based on my research for the last year since I started looking into this, is the autopilot effect. So I mentioned that a moment ago, that first of all, it's kind of, the brain is designed to conserve energy. And once those patterns become familiar, we just move into autopilot. So we'll be following the same routines, getting up, responding to the same pressure. And that basically means we stop noticing when something is no longer working. And the interesting thing about this is that it can continue for years until something drastic interrupts it, and that could be burnout or even a simple realization that things are not right. And yeah, that is very much the direction that a lot of us are headed. So it's not about how did I get here? I am too smart for this. It's more like you have just fallen into the autopilot effect here. And don't worry, there is a way to get out of it. The second thing we're going to look at is that high functioning burnout. And burnout rarely looks the way that people expect. It doesn't come from a single event. It builds slowly through those patterns. So if you have too many demands and little time for recovery, with a lot of responsibilities competing for attention, which I know I certainly did, and many of you will as well, over time, your nervous system starts to get into a state of constant activation, and you become used to pushing through fatigue and ignoring the signals from your body and delaying rest, delaying reflection. And then, for a while it works until it doesn't. And this is kind of where balance really comes in to force, because it's that connection between your mind, your body, and your relationships and your purpose. So as I say, like, your body stores what your mind ignores. And I really believe that, tension shows up physically, sleep becomes inconsistent. And things like, for me, I had back pain, I had low energy. And though I continue to perform well enough that no one notices, and including yourself, it gradually creeps up on you. So again, this is really prevalent in high functioning people because they take on responsibility easier and they push themselves harder. They're really used to solving problems and delivering results, but without that reflection, this can just become overextension. And when your identity becomes tied to productivity, slowing down can feel really, really uncomfortable and threatening. So that pattern continues. But it's not just about work. It can be a real alignment across several parts of your life. So if your work starts to feel unmeaningful, or your relationships lack presence or connection, and your health habits maybe start to slip, and your time and attention is constantly fragmented, burnout just isn't simply exhaustion. It's the feeling that your energy is being spent in ways that no longer reflect what matters most. So yeah, that's kind of another way that burnout rarely looks the way that people expect. Which takes me on to the hidden cost of being fine. And fine really does sound harmless. But most of the time, it's not an accurate description. It's a shortcut. It's a way of compressing complex emotions into something socially acceptable, and a way of avoiding deeper conversations. And psychologists often describe this as emotional compression. When we simplify our emotional experience into a single neutral label, we lose access to the information our feelings are trying to give us. So emotions are signals. They tell us what matters, what needs attention, what needs to change. And when everything becomes fine, those signals slowly become quieter. And over time, we basically stop hearing them. And the problem isn't the word itself. The problem is what it slowly replaces. It makes you lose touch with what you actually feel. And when your emotion gets translated into fine, something subtle happens. You just stop checking in with what's really there. Not just the difficult emotions, but the positive ones too. So the excitement, curiosity, pride, gratitude, joy, all of them just become flattened into the same neutral response. And psychological research shows that emotional awareness is strongly linked to well-being. So the more precisely we can identify our emotions, the better we are able to regulate them. And when everything becomes fine, that emotional awareness slowly fades. And the more that you keep saying, I'm fine, the less you actually notice how you are. So what this does is it keeps you in place longer than you need to be. So your routine's fine, your work's fine, your relationship's fine. Nothing feels urgent enough to change, but actually nothing's meaningful enough to fully engage with either. So you stay where you are, and over time, in that in-between space, something subtle begins to happen. You actually lose touch with what would actually feel good, what excites you, what energizes you, what you might want that's different or more. And that desire doesn't disappear, it simply becomes quieter. So fine keeps life stable, but it can also keep it really, really small. And it puts you into an autopilot and softens your curiosity. So what this means is you really stop paying close attention and you're just moving through your days on autopilot. The choices are all familiar, so you don't revisit them, and slowly you start the questions that once guided you become quieter. So you don't kind of hear the loud, what's no longer working, what do I want, what would make my life more meaningful. And curiosity needs that friction. We need a sense that something could be explored, improved, or changed. But when everything feels fine, the motivation to explore just disappears. And it keeps life running, but it also keeps you from fully living it. So fine also disguises itself as strength. Fine can sound reasonable, like I'm okay, I'll deal with it, it's not a big deal. And sometimes that really is resilience, but sometimes it's something else. It's really that instinct to minimize what you feel, to avoid disruption, to not make things complicated, to keep everything steady. And it looks like strength from the outside, but internally it can be a quiet form of avoidance. Real resilience doesn't ignore emotion, it acknowledges them and decides how to move forward. Sometimes fine isn't acceptance, it's hesitation disguised as stability. So what does fine do? It keeps your relationships on the surface. This might be where it matters most. When fine becomes your default answer, the conversation really stops there. So people will ask, you'll respond, and the moment passes. And what doesn't happen is the part that creates connection. So that moment where you'll say a little more, where someone understands you a bit better, and where there's something real is shared. Not every conversation needs depth, and not every moment needs vulnerability, but if everything stayed fine, something important gets missed. Humans are social creatures, and psychological research constantly shows that meaningful relationships are one of the strongest predictions of well-being and life satisfaction. And meaningful relationships require something beyond fine. Fine protects you from vulnerability, but it also keeps you from living an intentional life. So that's pretty powerful. And just moving on from that, why you're stuck, and I kind of talk about these two fears that quietly trap intelligent, capable people. And that's the fear of changing and the fear of staying the same. So instead of choosing, we tolerate, we hover. And this is what I call the tolerance trap. And the theory behind the tolerance trap is that most people don't fail because they lack ambition. They fail because they lower their minimum standards, not consciously. Gradually, you tolerate less, slightly worse sleep, slightly more stress, conversations that drain you, and work that no longer excites you, relationships that feel fine. It's like nothing collapses dramatically, it just erodes. You don't rise to your goals, you fall to your standards. And whatever you're willing to tolerate becomes your life. This is how high capacity people get stuck. And it's not because they're lazy, it's because they adapt and settle for less than they know they're capable of. And there's powerful psychological reasons for that. You know, so stability feels safe, uncertainty feels threatening, and you know, your identity feels fragile. If you've built a career, a reputation, a family, and a lifestyle, reinvention feels risky, even if something inside you knows it's time. And I know I've definitely been there. So you can start negotiating with yourself. It's not that bad. Other people have it worse. This is just adulthood. I should be grateful. And slowly, not that bad becomes your ceiling. But here's the truth. The fear of change keeps you in discomfort. The fear of staying the same keeps you restless. And living between those two fears is exhausting, believe me. And the real cost of staying stuck just doesn't affect your career. It impacts every pillar of your life. Your mind becomes noisier, your body becomes more depleted, your relationships become more transactional as you no longer show up as your best self, and your sense of purpose becomes more distant. You start reacting instead of responding. You focus on what's wrong. You assign meaning that reinforces limitation, and you repeat the same actions. And this is where patterns lock in. So I don't know if any of you can identify with that, but I certainly can. So this takes me to the question, do I have to be dissatisfied to be driven? And the science behind sustainable motivation. And the answer is no. And believing you do is one of the fastest ways to burn out. So what I mean by this is that for a long time, we've been taught that dissatisfaction is fuel. You have to be unhappy with where you are in order to want more. But psychology, neuroscience, and lived experience tell a different story. There is two types of motivation: deficit-based drive. This is motivation fueled by dissatisfaction, comparison, shame, and I'm not enough yet. It works, but briefly, and it comes with a cost. Anxiety, pressure, self-criticism, and burnout. You're always chasing relief, not growth. And then the alternative, which is growth-based drive, which is motivation fueled by curiosity, alignment, enjoyment, meaning, and self-respect. So this kind of drive is sustainable, and you move forward not because you hate where you are, but because you like who you're becoming. So I know that I was definitely stuck in the deficit-based drive for a while, but the research in self-determination shows that most sustainable motivation comes from autonomy, which is having your own choice, competence, which is feeling like you're making progress, and relatedness, which is connection, and not from dissatisfaction. So the positive emotion increases your persistence, creativity, and resilience. And really that is kind of just looking out for one of those, the pattern of dissatisfaction. The next one I want to focus on is comparison. So let me just get into where we're at with comparison. Comparison is great if you use it as a tool for teaching. but not taking away. Let me just get into this. Yeah. So we are comparison machines. It's how we learn, we copy, we calibrate, we improve. Comparison has helped us survive, belong, and build skills, but it can also quietly or loudly steal your joy. The difference isn't whether we compare, it's actually how and where we apply it. So comparison really helps and is really useful when it inspires without destabilizing. It clarifies what you want, not what you lack, and it offers information, not judgment, shows you a path, and is not a threat. So this is comparison as a compass. When comparison hurts, comparison is really harmful. When it becomes constant and unconscious, when your worth, when you measure your worth against others' highlights, it makes you feel behind, less than, or not enough, and it triggers shame, envy, or hopelessness. So that is when comparison is being used as a weapon. So I think just when you catch yourself comparing, ask yourself, what am I learning from this, or am I losing myself in it? If it motivates and clarifies, keep going. If it destabilizes and diminishes, redirect your attention. A much healthier way to compare is to compare yourself to your past self, not others present, and use comparison for direction, not validation. Notice what you admire, then ask, do I actually want that? And then celebrating others without making it mean something about you. So comparison is not the enemy. Unconscious and negative comparison is. Which takes me on to negative self-talk, identity, challenge, and identify, challenge, and replace. So you do not have to believe every thought you think. We've all got that inner critic, but when that voice becomes constant, harsh, and automatic, it really shapes how we see ourselves and limits what we believe is possible. And the good news is that you can change it. So what is negative self-talk? Negative self-talk is the automatic critical inner dialogue that is always judging you harshly, predicting failure, dismissing your worth, and amplifying your flaws. So it often sounds like, I'm not good enough, I always mess things up, no one really likes me, and I'll never change. But negative self-talk often develops from early criticism or neglect or some internalized expectations, comparison and perfectionism, past failures or rejection. So it's a protective mechanism, but it outlives its usefulness. So step one is to identify the pattern, start noticing when the voice appears, what's it saying, what triggers it. And then step two is really challenging that thought. Is it really true? What evidence contradicts this? Would I say this to a friend? And what's a more balanced perspective? So thoughts aren't facts, they can be questions, and they can be then replaced by a good narrative. Instead of, I'm not good enough, try, I'm learning and growing. And instead of, I always fail, try, I've struggled before and I've also succeeded. So that is not toxic positivity, it's balanced realism. I mentioned previously that the whole body-mind system is connected. So one of the other ways that we can flow into drift or find ourselves in drift is that we are not saying no. And I want to just dig into why no feels so hard. And it's saying no isn't a character flaw, it's a nervous system response. So when you're trying to say no, your heart might be racing, your stomach tightening, and you're getting your words stuck. And it's not a weakness, it's your nervous system doing its job. So why does no activate the nervous system? Saying no can feel threatening because the brain perceives potential rejection, conflict, or loss of connection. And for social creatures, these feel dangerous. So the nervous system activates fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Fawning, appeasing others, is a common response to avoid perceived threat. So what is the fawn response? Fawning means prioritizing others' needs to stay safe. It looks like saying yes when you need no, to say when you mean no, or over apologizing, suppressing your own needs, avoiding conflict at all costs. This is often learned in childhood, especially in environments where expressing needs led to punishment or rejection. So a couple of things that you can do is, before you can say no, you need to calm your nervous system. So you could try slow, deep breaths, especially long exhales, grounding. So really feel your feet on the floor, buying time, saying, let me get back to you, and self-compassion. It's okay to feel this way. And regulation creates the space for choice. And what we're doing is rewiring the response. So each time you say no and survive, your nervous system learns this is safe, and it takes repetition. So start small, notice the discomfort, and do it anyway. And over time, saying no becomes less activating. And this is not a character flaw. Remember, it's a nervous system response. And with awareness and practice, you can retrain your system to feel safe in asserting yourself. Your no is valid, your boundaries are necessary, and your body can learn to support them. This takes me on to handling big emotions and what actually helps here. So big emotions aren't problems to solve, they're signals to attend to. And big emotions can feel really overwhelming, like anger, grief, anxiety, fear. And when they hit, it's easy just to want to escape, suppress, or act out. But there is a better way, and it starts with understanding what emotions are actually for. Emotions are data. They aren't problems to solve, they're signals to attend to, and they tell you what matters, what boundaries have been crossed, what needs aren't being met, what's calling for your attention. The goal is not to eliminate emotions, it's to understand them. What doesn't help is suppressing them or pushing them down, avoiding them by distracting or numbing, or ruminating, looping in thought without resolution, or acting out, like lashing out or self-destructing. These provide temporary self-relief, but make things worse long-term. What actually helps is name it to tame it. So labeling emotions reduces their intensity. Feeling it in the body. Emotions live in the body. Locate where you feel it. Breathe slowly. Long exhales can calm the nervous system. And move. Physical movement helps process emotional energy. Express it. Journaling, talking, crying, creating, and self-compassion. And this is hard. I'm allowed to feel this. So the 90-second rule, neuroscientist Jill Bolt Taylor said that the chemical lifespan is an emotion is about 90 seconds. After all, what keeps it going is thought. So if you can feel that wave without adding stories, it passes faster than you think. And once that initial intensity passes, you can then reflect on what triggered it, ask what it's telling you, consider if action is needed, rest and recover. So big emotions are exhausting, but they aren't a problem to solve. They're signals to attend to. Feel them, name them, move through them, and trust that you can handle more than you think. So, what happens if you continually push emotions down? Unexpressed emotions don't disappear. As I mentioned earlier, the body stores what the mind ignores. And we're taught to be strong and keep it together. Don't be too emotional. And what happens in the brain and body when you suppress what you feel, the science is clear and it's not good. So emotional suppression is the conscious or unconscious effort to push feelings down, hide emotional expression, and pretend you're fine when you're not. It's different from regulation, which processes emotions. Suppression avoids it. So what happens in your brain is the amygdala, the emotion center, stays activated, and the prefrontal cortex works overtime to inhibit expression. So your stress hormones remain elevated, and your memory and cognition can be impaired. And suppression doesn't make the emotion go away, it keeps it running in the background. So, what happens in the body is that chronic suppression is linked to increased inflammation, a weakened immune function, higher blood pressure, digestive issues, muscle tension, and pain. So, the body is really keeping the score. Suppression also affects connection. It reduces emotional intimacy. Partners sense your disconnection, and it can lead to emotional numbing, and it makes conflict harder to navigate.